Hello and welcome to 21st Century Vitalism. This is a podcast exploring how we can best maintain a sense of energy, inspiration, and wakefulness while dealing with the unique stressors of this very strange yet very potent time. My name's Brett. I'm going to be your host on this journey, and joining us on the show today is the one and only Michael Rempel. He's first and foremost a musician who helped start the widely popular electronic jam band Lotus. He has since gone on to become a certified mindfulness meditation instructor through the Unified Mindfulness system started by Shinzen Young. In this conversation, we talk about his 20 years touring with Lotus, leading up to his departure, all while he was stewarding a consistent spiritual practice. We then go on to explore the system that has captured his attention and really dive into what makes it so effective and unique. At the end of the episode, he was kind enough to share a guided practice with us that really hammers the themes of this conversation home. So if you like what you hear today and want to keep in touch with Michael's work, head on over to michaelrempel.com and stay updated on all of his coaching and upcoming music releases. Before we get started, I also want to offer a huge thank you to Michael for helping create the new theme song that we've been using. I really think he did an excellent job capturing the energy of the show and really did not need that much prompting. I could not be more happy with how it turned out and found the entire process to be filled with ease, and it was so fun to interact with him in this way, and just feeling his enthusiasm for the project was just such a treat, which is kind of hard to come by in a creative process like this where you're trusting somebody else with the direction of your theme and branding. So I really just wanted to say that that was an incredible experience, and he's also open to work on other people's commissions. So if you are a fellow podcaster, if you have something that you need some audio work done, again, head on over to michaelrempel.com and shoot him an email. He'll respond pretty quickly. And yeah, it was affordable, and it was just a really good experience, and it had me really excited about the future of the show. So you can't really... There's no price on that, right? Like that's just such an important thing. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, everybody. Meditation, spirituality, music, festivals, celebration, and connectivity, really. So whatever you need to do, if it's stretching, sitting back, drinking some tea, just open your heart for today's guest, Michael Rempel. All right, Michael, we're live. I just want to start by saying hi and welcome to the show. It's really great to have you on, man. How are you doing today?
I am doing well in this moment, feeling good.
Good. Glad to hear it. So I think most people who are tuning in probably know you from your life history of working with the band Lotus, starting the band Lotus. For the folks who've never heard of you before, it's a pretty dang popular band in the jam band scene. And yeah, that's kind of how I came to find you as well. So I've known about you for since 2011. So yeah, 12 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of background about me, I've seen you play with them well over 20 times. And when you became kind of a distinct entity in the band to me was actually back in 2012. It was after attending the Rootwire Music Festival. There was a recap video that was released, and they had interviewed you. And I remember watching that because I was just so transformed by that experience and just really recognizing you as kind of somebody who felt kindred. Like, yeah, he had a similar experience, and the way you talked about it was very intentional. And since then, you've gone on and you have actually left Lotus and started to teach mindfulness meditation. And I've seen you come up in my feed a few times on social media. And I'm just like, you know what? I bet we'd have a chat or two. So I guess just kind of going back, you've been a part of this pretty influential band in a scene, and you've also had this spiritual practice running parallel to that. So, I'm just kind of curious to hear a little bit about your story of how you found your way with a foot in both of these worlds.
Great. Feels like such a big question.
It is, yeah.
How far back do I go?
The Big Bang. We can do that.
That seems to be, where things started. How far would you like me to go? Any
Yeah, I
room
mean, I
there?
guess, pertinent to the conversation, just like spirituality, and then, how that has kind of merged with your
Hmm.
experience with
Hmm.
Lotus, and I guess what that was like from a spiritual lens.
Hmm. Great. So yeah, coming out of so Lotus started, Luke Miller and I started the band with some other guys at Goshen College in northern Indiana in the fall of 1998. And I mean, we could start with the band name. That was like uh, Lotus was a symbol that I'd read about in some Eastern philosophical traditions like Buddhism, and which was a new thing for me at that time. Coming out of high school, I was 18, and I remember reading a Jack Kerouac book, Dharma Bums, and that was like my first exposure to Buddhism and the idea of meditation. And it just, something about the way he was writing about it, was really interesting to me and different from the spiritual tradition I had grown up with, which was Christianity. And while that was a beautiful tradition and way to grow up, and there was just a lot of beauty and integrity in the way I was raised within the Christian tradition, uh, I was curious. I was still curious about something more and different, and a different way to view spirituality or expand it beyond what I had known through that particular lens of Christianity. So, yeah, getting little tastes of meditation and what the practice could point to in terms of, I don't know, what we could call it, a psychological freedom or spiritual freedom, um, deep transformation, liberation, things like that. Concepts like that were really interesting to me at that time. And soon after that, I had discovered the teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, and he was just so influential for me. And I read his books, over many years. And so that interest in, meditative traditions and Eastern spirituality, I guess we could call it, was just parallel with my interest in music. I had a passion for bands like Fish. I was like a diehard Fish fan at that time, and it just made sense to me to I don't know, do my best to maintain both interests and communicate something of what I was getting from these teachers. As a musician, I think it was mostly like indirect. It wasn't explicit, but there was something about bringing a certain quality of presence, at least some intention to bring a quality of presence and curiosity and openness, ease, fluidity, flow into my way of being as a musician. And so that was like a thread that was important to me throughout my career with Lotus.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting with that scene in particular because I feel like it's just such a ripe and like fertile ground for a lot of spiritual exploration. And I feel, at least from my experience, um, there's just a lot of exposure to a lot of different belief systems, a lot of different imagery that a lot of people don't have access to until they go to like maybe a Lotus show, or I know the Grateful Dead had. There's an energy about that is really transformative in itself, and that's really what drew me to it. What do you think it is about? I mean, jam bands in particular have just like a spiritual quality to them, and I don't know
Mm,
why. Like, I don't know,
mm,
being on the stage and
mm,
engaged with the music making process. What do you think it is about that genre, and then also electronic music to a degree? What about that is so conducive?
mm. Yeah, it's a great question, and I imagine there's a lot of layers to it. But I agree. Like, it seems that this particular music scene, maybe more than others, I don't know if that's actually true, but it seems to me like it might, more than other musical genres or scenes like point to an experience of transcendence, maybe. I think maybe in large part because there's such a strong emphasis on improvisation and spontaneity. So there's this emergent quality of music that's just happening. There's an explicit intention from the musicians to improvise, and if it's true improvisation, nobody actually knows what's about to happen. And then, but everybody's in on it. So the audience also knows that they're, even if they've seen the band a dozen times before or 50 times before, they're probably going to hear something new because they're improvising. And then, yeah, that relationship, there's a relationship between the energy of the music and then how that impacts the listener and even in their body. So there's a lot of dancing in these contexts. And that kind of, there's this loop, this feedback loop of flow that lasts for however long the show is going on. Another aspect that occurs to me is that there tends to be a lot of like psychedelic medicines, things like that. And, you know, we could talk about if the word medicine is actually applicable in that context.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think those types of experiences, if someone's in a non-ordinary state with a psychedelic, that too points to something beyond the ordinary. And I think that there's some kind of recognition that can happen in that space where one's nature is intuited in some way. So there's a few pieces in response to what you asked.
Yeah. And I think most people who have interacted in these spaces would probably immediately be familiar with these elements that you're talking about. There is a level of exchange that I've found as a participant, as an attendee, that it really does feel like you are a part of the process as it's unfolding. Like the line between performer and attendee is a lot more blurred in these spaces than if somebody goes up, plays a very structured song that they wrote maybe 10 years ago. Like there's something about the creation that I found to be really impactful. Um, I know for me though, and I'm maybe a little bit of a stick in the mud. I'm a little bit of a curmudgeon. I definitely hit a point interacting with these spaces and using them as practices to experience that where I felt like a deep need to ground those experiences. And it's something that I've kind of recognized in my peers of people who have kind of gone off that path and developed other traditional practice, I guess, regiments. Um, and I just wonder, like, how can we best, I guess, use these opportunities, these experiences as a means to maybe create something deeper, something that is more than just buying a ticket to a show, going, having your experience, coming home, back into your mundane life, and then waiting for the next show. Like, is there a way that we can kind of take that energy and actually infuse our life with it?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question, and I resonate with that movement or that desire or that impulse to channel what's being experienced in a live music context in a constructive and grounded way into like meaningful life experience, whether we call that inspiration or I think it's an important question. And I think maybe not everybody out there who's going to shows like actually has that same impulse. Maybe it's just like entertainment and it's just a break from the norm, the day-to-day grind, if you will. If it's a grind for some people, it might just be like, oh, this is just a temporary refuge. It's an escape for a weekend, and that might be how some people relate to it. But I think I'm imagining that way of relating to it maybe um, won't last too long. I don't know. But so the question of like how was the question like how can we channel these experiences or use these experiences in meaningful ways into daily life, something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I imagine that the answer to that question just is so unique to each person. I think um, I would encourage a music fan who's in the scene that we're talking about, who, if there's an intuition to do something more with what is being experienced in these music contexts, to just like notice their curiosity, like what are you drawn towards, what is so interesting about the experience of live music for you. Is it a way of like being in your body? Is it like, oh my god, I notice like when I'm at these shows I'm like dancing and I'm like way more embodied than I maybe normally am, and that feels really good, potentially. I'm imagining. So that could be a thing. It's like, oh, I'm going to start practicing more embodiment outside of these live music contexts. Maybe going to an ecstatic dance or yoga, or there's so many different kinds of embodiment practices. But it could also just look like, say, if you see a particularly powerful show, you're really impacted by a particular experience at a particular show. It's like it could look as simple as like getting the recording to that show and putting it in your ears on the way to work. And using that as a way to like elevate your baseline of good feels in the body. It's a kind of energy that you get to enjoy, absorb, and see how, and make it like almost like an experiment. Like I'm gonna see how, to what degree can I channel this like lovely feel good positivity in my body from this music and like channel it into my relationships and or my work or whatever it is. So there's two examples that
I
come
love
up.
both of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting with this mode of inquiry where we are able to like pause and kind of reflect on like, well, like what am I enjoying about this kind of experience? Like what's drawing me this? Why am I looking forward so much to these particular spaces? And I think that mode of inquiry, it lends itself really well to really the big subject of what we're going to be talking about today. But it's one that I really encourage a lot of people throughout my life to just pause and really break down an experience into its constituent parts. There's so many moment to moment unfoldings when you're at a festival or at a show. Some of them are good, some of them are bad and uncomfortable. And to be able to actually break that down and really distill what your relationship is to each of these different elements, because it's not just one thing. I
Mm.
think it's very easy to homogenize the idea of a festival, and then you have an
Mm.
associated emotional response. But within that, there are so many, and we could just slow down and create a little bit of space to just see who are we? Like, what is the animating force in these environments that's getting me excited, that's slowing me down? I have been, sometimes you get really frustrated. These can be really beautiful spaces that are just highly stimulating to really just come to know yourself so much more kind of loudly. You're out of the realm of your day to day life, you're not in your usual momentum. So it's just a very raw, visceral, human kind of thing. And, using these spaces as an opportunity to just connect more deeply with the energies of life and yourself and, your likes, your dislikes. I think a lot of youth are really drawn to these spaces because of that. It's so foreign, it's so alien to what they're normally used to, and it really offers them insight because it's not all just one good thing, like there's so
Mm.
many emotions that happen, there's so many distinct opportunities that if we develop a sense of discrimination can really help us, in my view, equip us with a sense of clarity around the rest of our lives as well.
I like that. Yeah, I feel like you're kind of just pointing to like the essence of mindfulness practice in a way, using the festival experience as a way to like pay attention to experience itself.
Yeah.
Like what happens when I'm here? What's arising? And like being really curious about the ebb and flow, the arisings and passings, the pleasant and the unpleasant. Um, yeah, that's one thing I hear in what you said. And we're going to get into some more granular details about mindfulness. But the other thing that came up for me as I was listening to you was around belonging.
Mm.
I think that's another big piece for a lot of, especially young people, um, coming into this kind of music scene. Is like there's just this innate human need to feel a sense of belonging with a community. And I think that this scene can give people a sense of that to some degree. I think that's what people are often at least looking for. And when they
Yeah.
find a band that they love, or yeah, particular, like different bands have different followings, and it's like, oh, you share this love for this music, and you meet friends and community, and um, I think that's another thing that people are kind of longing for, is a sense of like really deep belonging. And I think that, at least I imagine that in some ways, if it can, the likelihood of finding that or really experiencing that sense of belonging, it might be limited depending on how much intention you actually bring to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that it really is one of the big motivators for a lot of people, and that's why people will start dressing as like fitting into the scene, and then they'll
Mm,
start maybe changing some of their behavior patterns. It's a very human thing, and that's something that I recognize and why I have such a passion for expanding out, because I feel like the most radical thing is to take that sense of belonging and then like how can I best maintain a relationship with that feeling even when I'm not plugged into like a core scene? Like how can I just feel a sense of belonging all the time, even if I'm just like at work, if I work retail? Like how can I feel connected to all of humanity at all times? It's a
mm,
very, I guess, anti-consumerist kind of thing where it's just like I don't need to purchase anything, I don't need to be a part of anything, I just am, and that is enough.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's beautiful.
So,
Um,
that kind of does, I think, dovetail really into a practice that we're going to be talking about for much of this conversation, which I think really lends itself well to cultivating that sense of belonging. And I think it ties up, I mean, I don't know if there's like a direct correlation, but, and I don't want to speak for your experience, but, you ended up leaving the band Lotus. Uh, I'm sure you've had a lot of years of belonging, a sense of, family with both the band, with the fans. What about your experience caused you to want to kind of step away from that kind of, I guess, familiarity, that sense of camaraderie ship? And how are you yourself cultivating that sense of belonging post that?
hmm. Yeah, in some ways that's such a it's it a difficult question in some ways, and I feel like when I attempt to explain why I left the project, I'll often say something different. It's like my mind can make up all kinds of stories about why I needed to leave. And I think it was a need. I felt just intuitively called um, to experience life in a different way, to experience life outside of a context that had shaped my life for 23 years. I mean, I was 18 when we started the band, 43 now. And um, there was a way that it shaped my sense of who I was, and how I knew myself. And there was a genuine curiosity to know, like, who is this guy outside of that context? So that's one layer. And, I think in truth, I might not actually know why I left. It might actually make more sense in some years from now, or maybe at the end of my life, it'll all make sense. In some ways, I'm just in the mystery of it still. I still don't know. And there are probably a dozen different reasons I can say about why I left. It didn't feel like the most fruitful, like artistic, like collaborative landscape for me. I felt like I wanted to pursue my own voice as a musician. That was one piece. I wanted to serve in a different way, or like serve and offer a different kind of service in a more explicit way. I did see my relationship to music making as a kind of service, or a form of service. Service being really important to me. It's a value I hold, but I wanted it, like, I felt like I wanted to like land in a context where, like, no, this is what I'm doing. I'm being of service to the human, to humanity, to the earth, to the human condition. And I wanted to be more direct about that. That was another layer. And part of it too was like a little bit of disillusionment with the scene we've been talking about. I found myself like perpetually surrounded by like substances like alcohol and cannabis and psychedelics, and not wanting to like make any of that wrong, but I'm just those consuming those things weren't a part of my lifestyle, yet I was perpetually surrounded by it. And I felt a need to create some space around that, and create some community, um, where the basic I don't know, there was more shared intention, I guess. And I found myself in different mindfulness communities now, in particular Unified Mindfulness. um, I feel like now I'm meandering, and I'm like, oh wait, am I still responding to your question?
You
So yeah,
led it perfectly where I was trying to go.
great, great.
Yeah. So what was it about unified mindfulness? And I mean, mindfulness in general is such a, I feel like it's kind of a floaty word these days because there's so many
Mm,
people who are saying it. I mean, there's like a mindfulness magazine. You can get it like your Kroger, you know? So
mm,
I guess
mm.
for the people who, have heard this term, what exactly is mindfulness?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about mindfulness through the lens of this organization, Unified Mindfulness. It's a place, or it's an organization I studied with to be a teacher and a coach of the practice. I really got into it more to just deepen my practice. It was something I'd been interested in for 20 plus years, but I wasn't a dedicated practitioner. And I got to a point where I was like, oh, I really want to start practicing intentionally, like practicing meditation, sitting on a cushion, and cultivating these, you know, mindfulness, attentional skills, we could call them. So, unified mindfulness defines mindfulness as concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity all working together. So there's these three basic attentional skills there: concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity. All those three, if those three are happening, we call that mindful awareness. And those are trainable skills. And so that's how I see practice is a cultivation of those basic attentional capacities in awareness.
Hmm. Do you think we could break down each of those? So, I mean, again, like I just, language is such a finicky thing, right? Like there's these words and people all have their own association of them. But I've noticed by studying Buddhism that when we're talking about training kind of a perceptual tool like mindfulness, like the definitions are very precise, and misunderstanding can create just like a cascade of future misunderstanding.
Mm.
So, with that, what do we mean exactly by concentration?
Yeah, so in they have, it's one of the strengths of unified mindfulness is they love to define things, to be clear about what we're talking about. So the way unified mindfulness defines concentration is the ability to focus on what is relevant to us in the moment. It's super basic. It's the capacity to focus on what is relevant to you in this moment. Can you do that?
It's one of those things that,
Yeah.
I think it's like a dying art, right? Like just to be able to focus with the amount of distractions that we have and
Mm,
things tugging on our attention.
mm,
Even
mhm.
that seems like a tall order, let alone the equanimity.
Totally. I mean, yeah, we live in you could call it a culture of distraction. There's a quote I've heard Sam Harris say often, which I love. I've heard it. He says something like, "There's a multi-front war being fought for our attention, and most of us are losing it."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So yeah, so it's worth training that skill, that
yeah.
capacity. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's concentration and sensory clarity. So when we talk about clarity, I think a lot of people who are maybe watching this, who are listening, they're like, yeah, but I hear you, I see you. Like, how is that something that needs to be developed more than what the baseline already is?
Hmm. Well, I think that there can be, well, um, sensory experience is rich and multi-layered, and I think that there can be things that we're aware of on the surface, and there's things that we're not aware of. Um, there can be things driving us, for example, impulses, hidden impulses, aversions, cravings, and those can often be driving our behavior. And so, sensory clarity is this capacity to track our sensory experience moment by moment. That's the definition, by the way, the ability to track our sensory experience moment by moment. And that includes our inner world as well as our external experience, what we see, what we feel in the body, what we hear, but also mental chatter, visual images, our thought forms, our emotions. And through practice, we can become more and more keenly aware of what's actually happening within us and around us. And as that awareness develops, there's a kind of inherent satisfaction. It actually feels good to be clearly aware. There's a reward that kind of emerges, and when we can be kind of fine tuned to what's happening in our senses.
Yeah. You know, in, we've kind of talked a little bit before this about, I'm a Buddhist practitioner, and that's actually whenever Buddhists talk about joy and the joy of practice, that is actually very similar to what they're referencing, in that just by being present, being mindful, there is a sense of kind of completion. You're really
Mm,
connecting to what's called like the suchness of an experience. And that in itself is actually more fuel. There's a momentum to it that inspires you to go deeper. It's not that there's
mm,
like an outside force that is like, you have to do this or else. It's like, I've tasted a little bit of what that is. And now I see that that is one of the most important things, is just being present with life as it's unfolding. And yeah, it's,
totally. I
it's,
love that
it's sweet.
suchness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what about equanimity? How would you best describe that? Because again, it's one of those terms that I think is like, you see it on like placards in like grandma's kitchens, you know? It's just like one of those like hallmarky kind of things. But there is something very real, grounded, and attainable with it. So
Mm-hmm.
how would the or you describe that?
Yeah, I would. Well, I'll give you the definition. Is it's basically being with our sensory experience without push or pull. It's allowing sensory experience. So without trying to grab onto it, make a pleasant experience last longer than it might naturally. Oh, I want to grab onto this. I want to hang on to it because it feels good, or pushing away unpleasant. So equanimity is like this way that we train to notice those tendencies, and it's a practice. you know so I
Yeah.
consider it a lifelong, and I imagine I'll be developing equanimity for the rest of my life, because challenges are going to continue to arise. And yeah, so to distill it down, it's just allowing sensory experience, without that push pull.
Yeah. Yeah, what I've really appreciated about my adjacent body of teachings when we talk about equanimity, it really what it opens the door to is to turn the mishaps of our lives into moments of practice rather than opportunities to be defeated. You actually get like a bolt of inspiration and a bolt of enthusiasm to like, oh, like this is what I'm practicing for. Is this moment like, can I maintain a sense of clarity about the fact that my chest is getting tighter, my stomach feels nauseous. I have all these like wild thoughts based on whatever is causing us to be stressed. And like that experience is so different than just being caught up and then in the momentum of your reaction,
Mhm.
and like that fundamental twist on the human experience of something that we don't like is so under there's no way to really articulate how profound that is.
It's true. It's a big deal. It is a big deal, and I think that, um, it's not maybe it might not be apparent to someone who's just kind of in the circumstance of their life, almost like it's like maybe a norm to be kind of just bouncing off of things and reacting to things. Like maybe that's what people are used to, and the idea that there's another possibility. Um, and it may be that a lot of people don't even recognize that. But it's not only another possibility, but it's a radical and powerful and profound possibility, of how we can be more and more aware and more skillful. Um,
Yeah.
and like you use that word reactivity, and what mindfulness allows is, we often hear a distinction between reactivity and a response. It's like
Hmm.
we actually get some choice, noticing a difficult, say, emotion arising. It's like you can track that in real time. Doesn't have to get the best of you, where then suddenly you're just like in reaction mode, and kind of perpetuating a kind of suffering. But you can suddenly be more skillful, but it takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. Yeah, it really
Yeah.
takes that quality of sensory clarity I've recognized.
Hmm.
And I think for me, in my experience, I guess I'm 3 years of practicing pretty much every day. And I mean, I still experience this most of the time, but just the recognition of how most of my action is reactive. Like as I'm
Mm.
sitting on the cushion and thoughts come up, I react to the thoughts and then I watch the reaction play out. And it's almost a little uncomfortable at first to really recognize how pre-programmed everything that we think, say, and do really is. Like there's kind of like a gate you have to walk through where you have to really be able to address that. And like that's really like the dawning of actual like sanity and like
Hmm.
free will, the ability to choose to not just be at the whim of your emotionality. That's really what
Hmm.
mindfulness represents to me is actual genuine um action, something new, something fresh, something spontaneous in an otherwise already set up, kind of established pattern.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, totally. One of the ways I look at mindfulness practice is just really it's like about uprooting habit patterns, and that's just another kind of simple way to look at it. um, Recognizing habit patterns, cultivating new ones,
Yeah.
more skillful ones. The new habit being, uh, mindful, clear, equanimous attention, and allowing for a kind of, you could call it inspired spontaneity,
So in the system, is there anything regarding, because a big part of Buddhism is loving kindness or Maitri or Metta. These are all names for the same things, but a sense of accommodation. And I mean, maybe this is the equanimity that we're talking about, but as we are sitting down and really recognizing the reactivity of our minds, for me, it took a while for me to not judge that and to not try
Mm.
and manipulate that, but to just allow it. And that took a lot of self love. And like developing
Mm.
that was its own skill. Like a meta practice is its own distinct contemplation. So, does have a way to kind of prepare you for the wildness of your mind?
Well, I mean, yes. And so unified mindfulness is there's a lot of depth and breadth to the system. You could look at it as a categorization system of the world's meditative practices, and so it's an attempt to kind of chart and map all different kinds of ways to practice meditation. So, you know, I don't know how granular. I don't think we're going to go super granular with this today, but like there is a category of techniques called nurture positive techniques, where you're intentionally developing a kind of emotional, positive affect, emotion, positive well-being, and bringing some attention to that, the experience of emotional positivity and cultivating equanimity with that. And it is a way of, like, the more you train towards um, well-being, um, emotional positivity, um, the more the more you practice with that intentionally, the idea is that not only can you appreciate it more deeply, but you can also notice it more often. And it seems to be helpful in reference to this like negativity bias that most of us have. We're kind of like, it's so natural, or maybe it's conditioned, or maybe both, that we're kind of we can. It's easy for us to be on guard. We want to be accepted. We want to be liked. We want to do well. These are all natural things, and because that's so strong in us, we can be kind of like tight, and we're often looking for, like, oh, where can I do better, and did I do that thing wrong, did I say the wrong thing, that kind of stuff. There's like this tendency to get fixated or anxious. We have so many of us have anxiety, to get like fixated, and there's so much inertia and habit patterns towards those kind of vigilant ways of being and thinking. So when we practice these nurture positive techniques, we're like kind of like working those neural circuits and opening them up and making them more accessible to us.
Yeah. It's a fascinating idea that I think a lot of people tend to miss, especially in like a Western culture. Like we all want to be feeling good and feel positive, and we often think that it's a result of the external world.
Mm.
And this even kind of links back to the first part of our conversation where I also felt kind of separated from the festival culture because I feel like that, when pursued to its natural end, is one in which you need to be in these spaces in order to have the experience of feeling well and connected. So going back to that, what I really appreciate about mindfulness is that it says it's an inside job and that you can
Mm.
actually work and cultivate a sense of
Mm.
well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is one of the most radical things we could undertake as a human being, like taking full responsibility. And like it's a practice. It's going to be hard some days, but the more you do it, again, it's the neural circuitry, which has been confirmed by science as well. Happiness is a habit, and we know the tools. We've had the tools, and now we're getting even clearer distillations of the tools, through the system as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've said several times you've been speaking. I feel like you've pointed to something several times so far, and it's this idea of like through practice, in my words, it would be that there's a kind of basic wellness that's independent of conditions and circumstances, and that's a big deal. It's
Yeah.
so huge. It's so, in a way, it's like outside of the box of what might be considered normal. Like it seems like we're in this culture where it's like everyone's wanting to succeed and win the win the game, and actually, true well-being, the truest kind of well-being that we can discover as human beings, like, it doesn't depend on conditions and circumstances. It's helpful to have, we need our basic needs to be met,
Yeah.
and there's a way of being in relationship to challenge, to physical or emotional pain, that while it is painful, it doesn't actually cause suffering. And that's an insight that can emerge when we practice.
Yeah. How would you distinguish between pain and suffering? Because I mean, from somebody who studies Buddhism, suffering is it's the first noble truth. Life has suffering.
Mm,
There's an intimate exploration of it that has like lists and there's different kinds. But I'm kind of curious about your experience in terms of how would you, I guess, categorize or understand suffering?
mhm. Well, I resonate with Shinzen Young, who's the Unified Mindfulness system is based off of Shinzen Young's teachings. Um, he's kind of the guy that mapped it all out, and um, he has this equation. I think it's so beautiful, and I really resonate with it. It says suffering equals pain times resistance.
Mm,
And sometimes
oh.
we hear this quote, um, pain is um, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
Hmm.
And so if you consider the fact that, pain is inevitable, we're gonna get sick, we're gonna break a bone, we're gonna have emotional pain, whatever, it's like we're all gonna experience pain. But the suffering only exists to the degree to which we resist it, is the idea. So um, yeah, we can, when we do experience pain, it's it it's going to be uncomfortable, and by staying curious and interested in the event itself, and like bringing a kind of spacious, open embrace, a loving embrace, this is kind of part of equanimity, to that experience, without adding this extra layer of, it's like saying no to it. No, I don't want to feel, you shouldn't be here. It's like there's this kind of extra layer we have, and that's where suffering comes in. And that's kind of how I would talk about it.
Yeah, that tracks really well with
Mm,
everything I've learned. I've heard it described as fixation is
mm,
another one, which resistance kind of has a similar stuck kind of quality. In the terms of fixation, is we oftentimes have a storyline that pain will kind of cut into. It's like, my life is supposed to be going this way. It's supposed to look like this. This is my expectation. And now I have a broken leg. Like, this isn't what I had planned. And it's because we can't let go of the story that we think our life should be. We can't
mm,
actually embrace the broken leg in
mm,
its full entirety. We can't concentrate on it because we're too
mm,
busy getting distracted by stories. We can't have that sensory clarity because we're too busy on the stories rather than the different sensations. And we're obviously rejecting it. So equanimity's
mhm.
out the window too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the folks, okay, so I'm sure a lot of people are like, all right, sign me up. This sounds great. I would love to not suffer. How do we do this practice? How do we start? How does it unfold, I guess?
Well, I imagine that just kind of depends on um, who you might be studying with, like what tradition you maybe have found. I would encourage, if this is new to any listeners, I would just encourage them to follow their curiosity. Um, do a little research and see what sounds interesting to you. Like, you know, pay attention to your experience as you're doing the research, and like, oh, is there a spark somewhere? Does allured or drawn to some teacher or system or tradition more than another? So I imagine there's different ways that people begin kind of practicing mindfulness. But in Unified Mindfulness, there's like a meditation technique called See, Hear, Feel, which is the first technique that's taught, generally speaking. And it's a really powerful technique because it's really adaptable to different life circumstances. And you can do it sitting, but you can also do it in motion and, while you're exercising. It's easy to do in daily life. It's simple in the sense that you can include any sensory experience as an object of focus. So it's not like many meditation techniques will focus on will have a narrow focus range. And that can be really challenging for some people at first. Understandably so. It's still challenging for me, several years into practice. But so See, Hear, Feel is a technique that's where it's like you can actually focus on anything. And it's kind of like liberating in that way. And it's accessible, that you don't have to bring your awareness to a particular narrow field of experience. And I can say more about that. Shall I continue going down this path? Okay.
Yeah, if there's more meat on that bone, let's see what's going on.
So I know we had talked before we started recording about doing a guided practice. So maybe, do we still have time to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll set some additional context and then we could do a little guided practice so we can have a direct experience of the technique and help ground some of the concepts. So with See, Hear, Feel, we pay attention to where our awareness is drawn naturally. When we practice, we just notice where our attention goes. And if we find our attention landing on something like a visual object, we use that as a moment to note the experience. So right now, over to my left, I'm noticing a salt lamp. There's a salt lamp on my desk. And if I were practicing this technique called See, Hear, Feel, I would let my attention land on that object and note it. And noting in Unified Mindfulness is a process of acknowledging a sensory event and focusing on it for a few seconds, anywhere between like 3 and 9-ish seconds. So see the salt lamp, and I have momentary high concentration, staying interested in the details of this experience of seeing. I'm landing there, focusing on it, and I let it go. And then I notice, now I'm noticing there's some like kind of tightness in my throat. And in the technique, the invitation is to then note that. Oh, this is a feeling sensation. And I'm acknowledging it, and I'm focusing on it. And then, just to use the last example, in between the times that I'm speaking, I can hear the hiss in my ears, in my headphones. I'm hearing that. It's kind of restful. It's subtle. When my attention landed there, I keep noticing it. So in this technique, I'm just going to land there for a few seconds and acknowledge and focus on it. So as we're doing this technique, one of the options is to use labels. So let's say we were going to do a 10-minute practice, set a timer for 10 minutes, and just allow awareness to do what it's doing. And you continually just acknowledge and you note. And if you want, you can use labels. Labels are very helpful for beginning practitioners to help develop the muscle of concentration and equanimity. Some people, when they first learn this technique, they can be resistant to the idea of labeling. It seems like this thing I need to do. There's like, it's like maybe a little bit of effort, but it's really a light touch. Some people might have an association with meditation practice that they're really just showing up to be restful. And that's understandable. And meditation can be restful. And there are lots of practices where you can focus on that if you want to. And I would say a technique like see, hear, feel, where you're noting and labeling, there's this little bit of effort, but you can do it in a restful way. And as a technique, it's very powerful for cultivating these basic skills of concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity. I want to check in with you. Are there any questions coming up about anything I've said so far?
No. Yeah, no, you're explaining it pretty well.
Cool. Maybe I don't know if I might have missed some details, but I want to maybe take us into a guided practice, and then we can find out if I've missed anything and see if there's anything that emerges afterwards. We can talk about it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Cool. So I want to invite the listener into, if you're in a place where you can sit still and find a posture that's wakeful and upright in the spine, and then relaxing down around that central pillar. It's helpful in meditation practice to find this nice balance in the body between wakefulness and ease. Wakefulness, alertness, and rest. And this posture in the body can actually support our access to equanimity. So to start, before we go into the formal technique, let's just take a little tour of our sensory experience. So you can actually start with eyes open. You do not have to practice with eyes closed with this technique. And just notice what you're seeing. You can look around like you might normally look around a space. Just being interested in the experience of seeing. Noticing what you see with your open eyes. In Unified Mindfulness, they call this see out, as contrasted to seeing in, which is your inner visual experience. So right now we're just working with the outer. Just noticing what you see. And it's also an option to kind of keep a soft gaze, kind of a downward, defocused gaze, is a way to induce a kind of restful visual experience with open eyes. And then if it feels okay for you, you can close the eyes. This is the next sensory space we're going to be working with, is the inner experience of seeing. So there's the mental screen. When we close our eyes, we can have a sense of the mental screen. And there may be images on the mental screen, or it might be blank. I've come to learn that some people don't have a lot of mental imagery. It's fine if it's more restful. You can just notice the lack of image activity. And if you are a person who sees mental images, you could kind of get to know this space, you might envision like a red apple. You can see that on your mental screen, with the image of a mountain or a bird. Or maybe there's not a lot of activity there. So if it's restful, you can notice that. This is the space of see in. Now letting that go. If you want to open your eyes back up, you can, or you can keep them closed. Let's move our attention now to hearing. This would be the hear out space in Unified Mindfulness. So it's what we're hearing with our eardrums. It might be sounds, might be activity, things happening around us, making sound, or it might be quiet. So we can notice activity or rest with our ears. And I'm going to pick up the pace just a little bit here. Now letting go of hearing out, and let's move to hear in. So this is the place where mental chatter happens. Or maybe if you get like a song stuck in your head, this is the space or location where you hear the activity of your mind. Just notice if you can hear your own voice, if there's any kind of mental chatter. You could even think of a song you like. You might notice what it's like to hear that. It's also very interesting to notice when the mind is quiet. It's a kind of auditory rest in the mind. And then lastly, let's move to the body now. This is the feel space. We can start with feel out, is the Unified Mindfulness jargon, feel out. And that is anything we feel in the physical body. It could be your breathing sensations, it could be temperature, tingling, maybe your heartbeat, an itch, anything that you relate to a physical body sensation. Also, for the sake of simplicity, Unified Mindfulness puts the senses of smell and taste into the feel category to keep things simple, because there's a kind of a somatic component to those. So smell and taste are included in the feel space. And then lastly, let's move to feel in. And feel in Unified Mindfulness is any emotional experience, the way that emotions feel in the body. So maybe there's an emotion present right now, whether it's joyfulness or maybe anxiety, whatever it might be, just notice how that feels in the body. If you want to experiment, if there's not an emotion present, you can just notice that. The lack of emotional activity could be experienced as emotional rest. But if you want to try, if there's nothing present, you could maybe take a moment to evoke something you're grateful for, or someone you're grateful for. Generate a little positivity if that's accessible to you right now. It's okay if it's not. You might play with just thinking of something you're grateful for, a beautiful experience you had in your life. And then just notice any correlating emotional body sensation that accompanies that. Okay, so now I'm going to invite you to let that go. And we're going to go into the proper see, hear, feel technique and work broadly with sensory experience. And the invitation here, we'll just probably just be here for a few more minutes, is to note and label your sensory experience. Just notice what happens. Just notice where awareness goes all by itself. And when it lands on something, you just acknowledge and focus on that experience. And the invitation is to use a label. So I'm going to give an example of what this practice might sound like. Here. See. See. Hear. Feel. That might be what the labeling sounds like. I said hear, I was hearing the hiss in my headphones. When I said see twice, I was seeing the blank, restful screen behind my closed eyes. Then my attention went back to the hiss. I said hear, I labeled that as hear. And then I felt the sensations in my hands and I labeled that feel. So give that a try. Your labels can be internal, can just be mental labeling, that's fine. If you're in a place where you can label out loud, that is welcome. If you notice more than one sensory event at the same time, like seeing and hearing at the same time, you can just pick one. No need to deliberate too much, just pick one and acknowledge and focus on it with a label. The intention with the labeling is to use an equanimous voice, kind of even keel, that can support your equanimity in relation to whatever you're noting. Just keeping it kind of a gentle tone of voice and going at a pace that works for you. This is your practice. It can be a little faster than the way I demonstrated it, or even slower. The point is not to try to capture everything you notice. There will be a lot happening in our sensory experience. Just allow your attention to land. Whatever sensory event draws you, acknowledge and focus on it. Let it go and repeat. And as we stay with this process, we're cultivating concentration by staying with the instructions. As we stay with the instructions, we're cultivating concentration. And as we acknowledge and focus on sensory events, we're cultivating sensory clarity. We cultivate clarity in terms of detecting sensory events and discerning their qualities, getting to know them. What are they like? Where are they located? How strong are they? Is it moving or changing? Staying interested and curious about the details of a sensory event. This cultivates sensory clarity. And lastly, we embark on this whole process, this whole technique, with the intention to be equanimous in relation to whatever arises. We're allowing experience to move freely. And we label with that gentle tone of voice that supports equanimity. So even if there's something really painful in your experience, whether it's physical or emotional pain, the invitation is just to acknowledge that. Feel. You can just use that label. Feel. Allowing it to be there, staying open, gentle, curious, holding experience with care. So, this technique is a way to build these basic skills of concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity in relation to the full spectrum of sensory experience. In this way, it's a powerful technique to bring into daily life. So, as you're ready, if you want to just notice what it's like to be you right now after having practiced this technique, maybe for the first time, noticing if there's any pleasantness in your experience, giving yourself permission to notice that and appreciate any qualities of well-being or clarity or rest or equanimity. If those things aren't present, it's totally okay. Doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It's a practice. We're training in these skills. But if there are benefits, it's helpful to give yourself permission to notice them. And as we come out of our practice and continue our conversation, we can potentially maintain some of these skills, sensory clarity and equanimity, as we continue the conversation. So, yeah, thank you for practicing with me here, Brett, and listeners as well. Thank you. And if there's any questions that come up for you, Brett, about anything we just did, I'd be down to explore those. Yeah, what's here for you?
Yeah. I just want to say thank you for bringing that practice. It's definitely different than what I'm used to. Um, I really like the divisions of seeing out, seeing in. And I like how that's all. It felt really, I guess, supportive in that process of differentiating different sensory inputs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think it was. Yeah, you did really good. You have a good meditation voice. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that was already very calming. I think something that I struggled with as a practitioner for a few years before I got consistent was actually getting to the cushion. For the listeners who are here who just did that practice, who might be feeling any which way, and if they want to continue working with this, but maybe struggle with consistency and discipline, Do you have any words of advice for how to create consistency so they can continue
Mm,
showing up and working with this?
yeah, great. Well, before I even respond directly to that question, you said something I want to respond to. I think did you use the word disentangle? Can't remember if you used that or if I that's the word I heard. And there's a way that you said you like the divisions.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and so I just wanted to highlight that in terms of like the exploring the sensory terrain.
Hmm.
There's this idea that we can sort of like disentangle sensory events within the sensory system, and there's a kind of freedom that comes with that. And an example here is like if we notice like a difficult emotion, it can sometimes fuel a thought loop, and the thought loop then feeds the emotion, and it's a kind of
Mm.
vicious cycle. So part of what I want to highlight here in terms of like paying attention to the different sensory spaces, like the emotional body sensations and the thought forms, is like part of what happens in a technique like see, hear, feel. Is there's this disentangling, and we can start to see how the visual thought is different from the feeling in the body, and the one does not actually have to feed the other. And so there's this there's this phrase, untangle and be free, in
Mm.
unified mindfulness. It's nice. So I didn't want to skip over that because it felt pertinent, and
Yeah.
um, there can be a lot of richness in the technique, and I didn't want to skip over that
And that's
particular
important.
piece.
In the training that I've had, we've talked a little bit before. My teacher's Chogyam Trungpa, and he had this really brilliant experiential saying that is very similar, which is the mind untangles itself in space.
Hmm,
And,
I
like
like it.
creating the space for the container of the practice, you see things very clearly, and it's almost like you don't have to do much. It
Hmm,
naturally, upon
hmm,
seeing, will start to uncoil.
hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah. So yeah, advice to get on the cushion or make practice more of a formal commitment.
Yeah, that's
Um,
something that I notice with my students whenever I've taught this to class is that it's the biggest hurdle.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, it's common. Yeah, I think that is, one of the biggest ones, and if you can um, address that, then you're well on your way, I
mhm.
would say. I was One of the first things that comes up. I would say start small. Um, this is kind of from the Atomic Habits school. I don't know if anyone's read that book. I'd recommend it, but I would say start small. And if you can create a space in your home that you can associate with practice, maybe it's a corner in your bedroom. You can get a cushion, great. Or you can sit on a chair, but there's a designated place that's where you're going to do the practice. That can be helpful. Could be like narrowing down to a time of day, um, like right when you wake up or right after breakfast, whatever it may be. It can be anything, but try to set some consistent time. And if you want to only start with like 2 minutes of practice, could be 1 minute. That's a great way to start building the habit. And then you can build up to like, 10 minutes, whatever makes sense for you, whatever you're available for. There's a few initial tips.
Yeah.
Could maybe say more.
Yeah. So, would it be enough for people to just do flashes of this? Or do you think that the creating the container of a formal sitting process would be enough? Or could people
Mm.
just be walking through life and just like, oop, see out? Or, what's your
Totally.
relationship to that?
I would actually highly recommend anytime you think of the technique, if it crosses your mind, bring it in, experiment it. It could be like a background practice, which is a concept in unified mindfulness. There's a variety of strategies to bring practice into daily life in unified mindfulness. One of them is called micro hits. So that'd be like a mini practice session. Anything under 10 minutes is considered a micro hit.
Mm.
It could be 30 seconds, but the idea is that you're fully in. It's like basically 100% of your attention is on the technique. So that's what qualifies it as kind of formal practice, but you could only be doing it for 30 seconds. So the idea is that you can sprinkle your day sprinkle your day with the practice, and it helps to bring in the CC&E, concentration, clarity, equanimity, throughout your day. And as you start to sprinkle your day with these micro hits, it can help maintain momentum of the attentional skills. So I'd say, hell yes, sprinkle it into your day. And it doesn't have to be formal practice. It could be like a background practice, like you're walking to the bus stop, whatever. Yeah, just staying open and curious, inviting those qualities of equanimity. Yeah, it does not need to be limited to formal practice, but I do encourage formal practice if it's accessible.
Yeah. Yeah, I know from my training, and this is a saying, I think it might have been Chogyam Trungpa, but it might have been Suzuki Roshi. And they're talking about enlightenment, which was enlightenment comes by as an accident, but meditation makes you accident
Accident
prone.
prone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, it just helps build a habit, actually committing to a formal practice so that those micro hits become more readily available. And also like the idea of just like micro dosing awareness. Like that's just that's pretty
Mm,
sweet. Cool.
nice. Yeah. Maybe I just throw in this word momentum here.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of what we do when we do formal training. We're cultivating a kind of momentum of these mindfulness skills. And I don't know if we're going to get to this today, but like retreat practice, for example, is a place where you can get it's like a mega dose of practice and cultivate a ton of like natural momentum of these skills, which then when you leave the retreat space, there's and you still have your morning practice or whatever, or evening practice and micro hits and background practice. There's a way that you can maintain this kind of momentum of practice where it becomes um, um, you know it becomes more and more effortless.
Yeah.
The availability of concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity becomes more of a trait than a kind of momentary state that you're cultivating.
Yeah. I liked this idea, and this was my direct teacher, David Nichtern. He was talking about how like people don't have problems with discipline. It's just that they're disciplined in like the wrong things.
Mm.
So we actually have the discipline of mindlessness. So
Mm.
we've built up this strong habit pattern of not paying attention. So in using that, it's like actually we know how to be disciplined. We actually have the skill right now, no matter how distractible you are, no matter how much you struggle with that. It's just that you've disciplined yourself to struggle with it. So you can even use that as like a sense of momentum and kind of be a little bit more equanimous with whatever state you're in, a little bit more understanding that it's available.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, totally. And I always like to just remind people too of just like to not take yourself so seriously, not taking ourselves so seriously. It can be a thing where it's just like we want to, like, we know, at least for me, it's like I feel like I know that I can improve. I know that I can evolve as a human, and it becomes this serious thing, and I want to get it done, and it's, but like I have to remind myself, especially in relation to real, like, authentic pain of being human that we all navigate. It's like in like what we see in the world, there's just so much suffering and craziness and chaos and unknown. It's a wild time to be on the planet, and it can it can feel like so serious, at least for me. It can feel so serious. It's like, God, I really want to be my best self, but then I have to like take a step back and be like, okay, wait, I don't want to like lose my innocence here, my childlike, or my beginner's mind, staying curious and bringing a quality of playfulness to it, gentleness, understanding, and like really bringing that kind of like loving kindness to ourselves as we're embarking on a project like this, and that it just can really help us along the way with our practice. It's like, okay, I'm doing this, and I'm here to enjoy my life at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. And I think that that childlike wonder and that curiosity is the medicine that we need. And I think that that is something that is part and parcel with mindfulness, because you naturally do, once you start to see things clearly, like, well, why is it that way? And you kind of do remember that sense of being able to be in the unknown and ask questions. And I think right now a lot of the issues in the world are because we think we know too much.
Hmm.
And, I think people just need to be a little bit more comfortable with uncertainty. They need to be a little bit
Hmm.
more comfortable with just responding with a more humor, not taking
Hmm.
everything to be so heavy. And also
Hmm.
seeing that all these judgments we have on ourselves, it's beautiful that you bring that up, because I think a lot of people, modern spiritual aspirants, really do struggle with that. And seeing that constant need for self growth is a form of
Hmm.
aggression. It's
Hmm.
a form of self
Totally.
aggression, because it's like, I'm not
Totally.
good enough now. I'm going to
Hmm.
have to do these crazy yogas and like really, do all this wild stuff so that I can finally be pure enough to love myself. It's like,
Hmm.
or you can just start loving yourself as you are now, and then, give it 20 years. It's a long
Hmm.
process. And then you'll
Yep.
start to really recognize the love that was always there.
Hmm. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really resonating with all of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm resonating with this, but we are at a time right now.
Hmm.
I can hear my roommates starting to practice their guitar, and I'm well beyond what I told them, so I'm gonna respect that. Michael, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your practice, your mindfulness, just the work that you've done to get you to where you are right now. I really do think it is the medicine that we need. I think
Hmm.
people approaching sanity, approaching spaciousness, humor, reflection, I think it is exactly what we need. So,
Uh, Feels good to receive all of that, and yeah, thanks for having me. It's a real honor to be here, and I want you to know I super appreciate the invitation, and really enjoyed getting to know your podcast, and I look forward to uh, staying with you and what you're putting out there. It's totally right up my alley. I love what you're doing. Really appreciating you. Thank you.
thanks. So, where can people stay plugged in with you? Because you got some offerings, you got some stuff, you got music. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so my website is michaelrempel.com. It's Rempel. You can also get there by mikerempel.com. And yeah, recently I've been in kind of an incubatory. I don't know if that's a word. Is that the word I'm looking
It
for?
is now.
I've been in a kind of like a cocoon, creative cocoon. I haven't been super out like with teaching mindfulness and releasing music yet, but I'm kind of like exploring my voice as a producer and moving towards some, I think, some coaching offerings soon, very likely this fall. So maybe by the time this podcast gets released, maybe there'll be some more updates on my website. But yeah, it's michaelrempel.com. And I would recommend if somebody wants to stay tuned with either my music or my mindfulness stuff, just to sign the mailing list. And I will let you know once I'm
Right on.
doing stuff.
Yeah, things are happening.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate it. We will catch you next time.
See you next time.
All right, everybody, that was the episode. Thank you so much for listening all the way through until the end. Again, you know who that was, but in case you forgot, that was Michael Rempel. You can follow him over at michaelrempel.com if you need any commission work. He is your boy. You can also reach out to him if he's open for coaching at this point. It'll say on his website. He's also got some music on Bandcamp that's really cool. It's really vibey. So thank you again so much for listening through. If you want to support this show, head on over to patreon.com/21st Century Vitalism and consider signing up. You can also leave us an Apple review, subscribe on YouTube, follow on Instagram, like us on Facebook. I'm surprised I can keep all those in order. Either way, you know what to do. It's the digital age. You're not, well, you might have been born not that long ago. I know people are getting younger. I'm getting older. It's a weird world out there. So whatever. Thanks. Bye.